Oh, Christoph, will you make me the host so that I can get it to Facebook Live?
Yes.
Yes,
Let me
that's
go
right.
to participants. And Ben Moore, make host.
Yeah, and
Yes.
then yep. Okay, that's great. And then we can I'll start the broadcast, and we'll let people come in, and then I'll get it on Facebook Live. I'll just chat over when we're live on Facebook, and then I think we could start.
Hold on one second. I almost left the meeting. That's not good.
Yeah, don't.
Okay. So, Ben, you're recording, and
yeah, we're broadcasting it, so people are coming in.
Oh, 9, 11. Yay, I see the numbers increasing down there. Welcome to 21 now. 23. All right. I'll wait for about a minute or so for people to get a chance to click into the Zoom webinar and to join us here. And then we will get started with Tim Slover and Jane England. And we're visiting London. So I'll give it another few seconds if you guys don't mind. Our webinar is licensed for 100 people, so let's see if we get there today.
In my brain, I'm already there.
I know. I wish we could go right now. All right, I'm going to get started, everyone. My name is Christoph Dressler. You're in a webinar with GoLearn at the University of Utah. We're the faculty-led travel program for the U. Anyone, any age, any affiliation, you don't have to be an alumni necessarily, but clearly we love alumni on our trips. We have faculty leading trips all over the world, just not right now, as you know. So instead of taking us on the road, we thought we'd reverse the role a little bit for our webinars. Every Thursday at noon, we will have a trip leader or a faculty from the University of Utah or an expert that guides our trips all over the world, and also domestically. We're doing things in New Mexico and Philadelphia and other places. Have present and bring the road to us, bring it to our living rooms. And as you can see, I'm the only one out of the three of us who is in his office, but Jane and Tim are joining us from their private residences respectively. And again, if you just joined us, this is a presentation on, well, we call it a London Scrapbook, and we are talking and bringing you London to your living room. I know that many of the people out there who are joining us today have traveled with Tim and Jane to our trips. They have been doing this for us since 2013, every year. And in some of the years, they went twice. So we have a huge fellowship on these two. So thank you for all your work. And most importantly, thank you for joining us, giving us your time today to take us to the greatest city on earth, London. Yeah. So with that being said, I'm gonna get out of the picture and Tim and Jane will take over. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Christoph. It's a great privilege for us to be here with you. Welcome, we miss you. We can't see you. We don't really know who's here, but we feel your presence. If we haven't met you in person because you haven't done one of these trips, welcome. You know what they say, old friends are gold, new friends are silver. So we're hoping to make a lot of friends today and be reminded of our wonderful friendships and trips. We just thought, we called it a London Scrapbook because we just thought this is a city that Jane and I really, really love. And we just thought it would be really interesting to just share 30, if you're going to count them, 30 pictures. We won't talk too long about each one, of different places, different things, different aspects of London. So if you've gone and you've seen some of these things, maybe you've seen all of them, it'll be kind of a reminiscence for you. We'll try to give you just a little new information about each thing. If you haven't gone, this gives you an idea kind of what it's like to go on a GoLearn trip. We love GoLearn. We love continuing education at the U, and we love doing that. Jane, what do you love?
Well, I also, like Tim said, love to share this city, and right now virtually this city that I think combines the best of great cities. I feel lucky right now that we're in such a gorgeous place of Utah in the spring, but normally in May we're there in the midst of this most exciting cosmopolitan city. And so whether we're taking undergrads there like we would be in May, or adult travelers through Go Learn in October or the spring, it is a very vibrant and exciting place. So I love being a part of someone experiencing it for the first time or seeing London through some new eyes for returning travelers. And so it's a pleasure to share some images and memories and thoughts on that today, even though it's through the miracle of Zoom.
Yeah, so what's going to happen in a minute is Jane is the controller. Remember that Jane is the logistics queen. So Jane is going to be the controller of moving us from picture to picture. So, as Samuel Johnson once said famously, let's to London, because it has an infinite of variety. All right, this might be a little rough. Okay,
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's good. That's all good.
Oh, wait. Oh, shoot. Just a second. Don't look at that one yet. Okay, here we go. And that. Okay. Is that good? Can everyone see that?
Okay.
Can you see it, Tim?
Okay, so there it is. That it's maybe a surprise to start with not an iconic London monument, but with our very own friendly neighborhood underground station, Earl's Court Station. If you come with us and you stay with us, this becomes your transportation hub. The London Underground, you know, is the oldest underground in the world, actually. Opened in 1863. On that day in 1863, there was a little train that went 3.5 miles from Paddington to Farringdon. It was steam operated. Immediately, about 40,000 people wanted to do it. And within 6 months, 26,000 people were using the underground every day. That's 6 months after 1863. Today, Jane, you want to take a guess how many people use it every year?
Ooh, was in the millions, I'm sure, but I don't want to lose the quiz, so I don't know.
It's like a pub quiz. It's 1.3 billion people use it every year. Every train averages 114,500 miles a year, which is 4.6 times around the Earth. And talk a little bit about the way we access it. Talk a little bit about the Oyster card.
Well, I wish I had a visual aid with me, because I have my, oh, actually I do. Here we go. Well, at least the case, my trusty National Theater Oyster card case. But when we go there, whether it's for the 10-day trip or our student trip for 6 weeks, we have unlimited access. So it's great. You just tap on and tap off and travel unlimited around central London. And then sometimes we do the exciting out to zone 3 or even 6, and we make that added on to our Oyster cards. But yeah, it is a freedom that is very exciting to be able to go throughout a city with very little stress in that way. And they're pretty clean and reliable, actually. I'm comparing it to the New York Metro, but that's an unfair comparison.
Yeah, I mean, and here's why it's called an Oyster card. It's called an Oyster card for 2 reasons that London Transport has put forward. One is that, like an oyster, it has a hard protective shell with a pearl inside, and the pearl is the travel card, right? And I'm really excited about this because I'm a Western boy, you know. I mean, public transportation for me meant my parents' minivan. So the fact that you can get everywhere, because the Oyster cards are good on all buses too. The other reason is that the idiom, the world is your oyster, meaning when you've got this card, you can go everywhere. Well, Earl's Court Station is, believe it or not, a grade 2 listed building of historical significance ever since they restored the original roof. Cost about £4 million to do it. Earl's Court's our neighborhood. The Earl in question was Lord Rich, the Earl of Warwick, and it's part of the royal borough of Kensington and Chelsea. We always want to just live in the finest neighborhoods. Let's look at our home. There it is. Everybody remember this who's stayed there? We've stayed at the Rockwell Hotel ever since 2013. And it's kind of our home away from home. We know them, they know us. You want to talk a little bit about the people that run the place and make us feel it welcome and at home?
Yes, so Roxana has been our kind of queen of the Rockwell for a few years now. Before it was Alexandra, and I know there are other people and groups even that go and stay at the Rockwell, but in my mind, I think they love us the best, because I can't imagine them treating any other group better than they seem to treat us. They really take good care of us, and most of the people who work there are from other areas of what we would call Eastern Europe, and so there's this really interesting international feel already, but it's a beautiful little small hotel that's really convenient. So I love being at the Rockwell.
Yeah. It's a boutique hotel. As you can tell from the picture, maybe it looks like you're going into a townhouse, and that's exactly what these boutique hotels in Kensington are. They're converted townhouses put together, maybe 2 or 3 put together, it's again very, very convenient. And the Romanian mafia that runs it is no. They're all our friends, and they treat us well. Now, some of our theater chats are held right there in the hotel, but most of them are held here at a pub. This is the King's Head pub, and it's just right down a little street from the hotel. We tend to have our chats up there on what the English call the first floor, what we would call the second floor. We do it in the morning, usually around 9, 10 a.m. Pubs aren't very busy then, so they're happy to see us. And we go and we sit at the tables, and they bring us coffee and tea. One time, one of our younger travelers at 9 a.m. asked if she could have a Bloody Mary, but even in England, they don't serve alcohol that early. So we go there, and this is kind of the beating heart of the program. Christoph taught us well. It's supposed to be go learn. And our motto is Aristotle's, to learn gives the liveliest pleasure. So before we go to a place, we meet up there and we talk about it and get ready to go. But even better, a lot better really, is that when we've seen a play or a historical site, the next day, part of what we do up there is we all get to talk about it. What did you think of the play? What did that mean to you? In fact, let's look at the inside of the first floor of the Rockwell Hotel. There we all are, some of us, sitting around listening to a man named Kent Christensen, who for the last few years has been kind of our art history lecturer. This is just last March, just a couple months ago. He's talking to us, getting us ready to go and see an exhibition of art at the Tate Modern by Andy Warhol. Do you have any fond memories of the King's Head pub?
Well, like the other places that we've gone to, like Christoph mentioned, since 2013, we've worked with Go Learn on trips. And then for many years previous to that with our University of Utah student groups. And these people have become our friends. So Amelia and Adam at the King's Head take really good care of us. And it's really a pleasure to get to know people for whom London is their home all year, not just when we get to make it our home. So I have very fond memories of the people there treating us so well.
There are 2 dates that seem really important to me in pub history. One of them is 1991. That was when the first gastropub opened in London. Now, they'd been serving food, fairly ghastly food in pubs, pickled eggs, I don't know, since the 1950s, actually. But in 1991 was the first gastropub where they started to serve really excellent food. And now a lot of them are fabulous places to have a meal, particularly a Sunday roast. The other important date is July 1st, 2007. Something got banned in pubs. You want to take a guess? what got banned on the 1st of July, 2007?
2007, would it be smoking?
Smoking, exactly.
Oh.
I could hardly ever go into pubs because they were so
Yeah.
smoky. Now they are non-smoker friendly. So that's pubs. Oh, okay. So we've been, no, that's good. So we've come into Earl's Court Station. We put our bags down at the Rockwell Hotel. You've seen where we're going to have our chats. It's time to go out to London. It's time to go out and see some iconic landmarks. Everybody knows what this one is. Everybody calls it Big Ben. Actually, that's the name of the bell inside that clock. It's called the Elizabeth Tower. Actually, since the Diamond Jubilee in 2012, it's been called the Elizabeth Tower. And it stands 315 feet high. It's 40 feet square. If you want to climb up there, you can with permission of your MP, your member of parliament. Be about 400 steps to get up there to the lantern. It's the largest freestanding four-facing clock in the world. And if you look at the face, maybe you can see it just down below. You can see some writing. The writing says, Domine salvum fac reginam nostrum Victoriam primum. O Lord, save our Queen Victoria I, which tells you that it was built during the Victorian era. It was actually finished in 1859. The fire destroyed most of the Palace of Westminster in 1834. So this was about the last thing that got rebuilt in the palace. I don't know, it's been under scaffolding for a while.
Yeah, for I think at least about a year or so, and I think for another little bit, but I think they've revealed just the clock face. I don't know if that's still available, but the rest is getting worked on, getting its facelift.
One time when we were showing this to somebody, and we kind of make a big dramatic deal out of showing this to people because it is the iconic, kind of London monument. And we happened to be there, luckily, when it was chiming the hour, and somebody said, "Oh, they've taken that from my grandmother's clock." But it's just the opposite. That famous bum, 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 bum that now clocks use everywhere, including here at our house, all taken from Big Ben.
Should we move on?
I guess so. Hard to leave Big Ben. Let's stay in the neighborhood. Let's stay in the neighborhood and say, if there's one building for me in London that you just have to go to, if you've been there, if you're going for the first time, if you're going kind of for the 40th time, you need to check in here again. This is Westminster Abbey. And I feel that way because even just the building of it is 500 years of English history. The part we're seeing there, the part to the left of the screen, on the left-hand side of the screen, and going over about a little less than halfway, or maybe halfway, that was started building in 1245 in the reign of Henry III, and they finished that in 1269. Now, can you see where the pillars, those are the buttresses, can you see that about 1, 2, 3 over, all of a sudden the capitals go higher? That's where the building stopped in 1269, and it didn't start again until 1376. And then they built the rest of the nave there, but it didn't actually get finished. It took 125 years to do that part of it. Didn't actually finish until 1500. Those towers, which everyone associates so strongly with Westminster Abbey, and they should, but they look very much of a piece with it. They were built long after the Gothic style was pretty much ancient history. Those were actually completed in 1745 during the reign of King George III. That was the great Nicholas Hawksmoor. And he was a modernist, but he felt strongly that he should, as the king had requested, build these towers to be harmonious with the rest of the Gothic building. Inside, it's a mausoleum. 3,300 people are buried in Westminster Abbey. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but any favorite monuments to dead people for you, Jane?
I love I mean, I'm a Jane Austen fan. I love seeing, I don't think she's not actually buried there, but I love going to Poets Corner and seeing various writers, including her and Chaucer and even a monument to Shakespeare. But as you remind us, many of those people aren't actually buried there. But I do love the grave to the unknown soldier. I think is so beautiful. And I love the description that you give when we stand around that and you share about that, the process of that grave being put there. I also love the grave to the person who hoodwinked the king into getting to be buried there because they claimed they were the oldest. They'd lived through, what, 7 different kings and queens or something?
Yeah, and died at age 152.
Yeah.
Not the only commoner buried at Westminster Abbey, but the most common huckster buried at Westminster Abbey. You're right, I do too. Elizabeth I is buried at Westminster Abbey. George Frederick Handel, Charles Dickens, and as you pointed out, Chaucer. Between the grave of Charles Darwin, and some people are surprised to find out that Darwin is buried at Westminster Abbey, and the grave and monument of Isaac Newton, is the newest grave at Westminster Abbey. June 15th, 2018, another scientist was buried between those two eminent scientists, as if to say, this scientist is of their caliber. And that was Stephen Hawking, the theoretical physicist. He was cremated and his ashes were put under the floor there. It's a really quite striking monument over the top of it. According to his wishes, what it has on it is his formula for black holes, because he's associated so strongly with learning more and more about black holes. So quite beautiful. Well, we could spend hours at Westminster Abbey, but we must move on. Tower Bridge. What do you want to say about Tower Bridge? Have you ever walked across it?
I've never walked. I think you can walk up to the upper level, which has a glass bottom, and that always makes me a little bit nervous. But I have walked across it, and partly it's a great view, but also there's a new theater just on the opposite from the Tower of London, which is over on the north side of the bank, or the left of this photo. And then, or actually, no, we're standing close to the Tower of London on this photo. And then on the opposite side, you can see there's a new theater, the Bridge Theater, which is a pretty exciting theater space. And then further along to the right is where you're heading toward Borough Market and the Shard. So I've walked around the neighborhood, but and walked across the bridge, but I've never walked on the upper deck.
Yeah, I think it costs money to walk on the upper deck, but you can walk across the lower one for free.
Yeah.
You know, you'd think that it's called Tower Bridge because of obviously these two towers, right? At each end, 213 feet high, and the span in between is about 200 feet. But in fact, it's not called Tower Bridge for that reason. It's called Tower Bridge because at one end of it is the Tower of London. And even though it was actually built in 1894, it was an attempt to reflect the architecture of the Tower of London, to be reminiscent of it. So it would be of a piece with it. You can open, that bottom part does open, right? That's,
yes.
Takes about 5 minutes for it to split in half and go up about 86 degrees to let tall ships go through. I've never seen that happen. Except in videos, but someday. I guess we'll have to go back to London, Jane.
I guess we'll have to.
Okay.
Oh.
There we are. If there was ever a monument to theft and empire, this is it. It's the British Museum. And for many, many, many years, it was the most visited building in London. It now is second place to an art gallery, the Tate Modern. But it's got about 7 million objects in it from every continent. So wherever England, remember how the old saying was the sun never sets on the British Empire, right? And when I was in 3rd grade in Raymond, Alberta, Canada, we had a map of the world that had all the pink parts were British. all over the world. And so I got a very strong impression as a little boy, even though by then the empire was gone, you know, just how large and extensive it was. Well, when the British went, they liberated many antiquities and brought them back to London, and put them in this Greek Revival building designed by Robert Smirke, built over a period of 30 years between 1820 and 1850. So the side bits got built after the central bit as they got more and more stuff. One of the things that amazes me about the British Museum is that even though you can go in there and see the freaking Rosetta Stone, which was the key to learning how to translate Egyptian hieroglyphs, it's free. Most of the museums in London are free. Any thoughts about that?
Well, it's something that I, again, makes, I love other cities, and I haven't traveled to them nearly as much as I'd like, but it is something that always makes me feel like I can win the argument of London being the great cultural city, because it's still mostly subsidized in those ways, the free galleries and for the most part, often subsidized cultural events, theater, etc. And I just think that's not as true for many other great cities, which are great. So I love that you can not feel like you have to get everything in one visit. If you're lucky enough to be in London for say a week or so, you can go back and make a donation if you can, but that you can enjoy the arts, and that is very democratic in that way. It's for all. It's not just for those who can afford to pay the, how much is the Met now? About $25 to go into the New York Met.
Yeah, and that's not optional anymore like it used to be. I think the British Museum has made me lazy. I've never been to Greece, and I really should go to Greece. I bet many of people who are tuning in have been to Greece, and I really want to go. But if you go to the British Museum, they've got the Elgin marbles, which is the frieze that goes around the top of the Parthenon on the Acropolis. And so I feel like, well, you know, I'll just go to London again and see this instead. All right, one more really, there it is, really, you know, you got to go here, right? Trafalgar Square. This was opened in 1844. Developed by an architect named John Nash, the same one that had done sort of the extension of Buckingham Palace and Regent's Park. It's named for the Battle of Trafalgar. That's when Admiral Nelson and the British Royal Navy defeated Napoleon's French and Spanish fleet in 1805. And it's really surprising in London. In other European cities, a place like Trafalgar Square would not be so surprising, but in London, there are very few really big open spaces like this. They tend to try to make open spaces. They did with Covent Garden, but then it fills in with things. And here they didn't let it fill in. And so it's really the largest kind of open space there. They kind of figured out quite early on that because it was such a large open space, people would congregate there for protests. And that, in fact, is quite true. The Chartists, who were trying to get universal male suffrage in 1848, met there. When they met there, though, that fountain you're seeing was not there. Somebody's bright idea was, well, maybe if we put a couple of big fountains in Trafalgar Square, that will discourage people from coming. Just the opposite happened, as you can imagine. People loved the fountains and loved to splash around in them, and it was a good diversion while you're getting ready, you know, for your protest. In 1990, I do remember this one was the poll tax riot that happened here at Trafalgar Square when Margaret Thatcher, then Prime Minister, introduced a new tax just for being alive, the poll tax. And there was a huge, huge demonstration there that actually turned violent. But the biggest one in the history so far of England was the Iraq War demonstration in 2003. Were you around for that? I feel like you...
I was there. I wasn't actually in Trafalgar Square. I was where it started or ended in Hyde Park corner area.
Yeah, they usually start here at Trafalgar Square, and then they march up to Hyde Park. So you saw it there. It must have been amazing.
yeah, it was pretty exciting. Yeah.
They also do lots of other great things there. Every year there's a huge Indian festival. That's East Indian, because there's a huge Indian population, of course, in London and all over the UK. And the food is great and the music is great. So anything where big open spaces are happens there. The building you're seeing there in the background with the little dome is the National Gallery, which actually predates the laying out of the square. That was there before the square was laid out. It's now the 4th most visited museum in the world. And it houses the national collection of European art, mostly European art. Asian art tends to be in the British Museum. It was a much criticized building, Jane, when it was built, finished in 1824. The architect was a guy named William Wilkins. And I'm sorry, he entirely finished it in 1838. And he was immediately criticized for the weakness of its design, and especially that little dome, which was referred to by a cruel newspaperman as a pepper pot. Now, the same guy's name is John Summerson. He was the critic. He said, considered critically as a facade commanding a great square, its weakness is apparent. Now, you have to be able to take criticism if you're an artist. But Wilkins, it was very hard on him. He had just been appointed professor of architecture at the Royal Academy, and he retired completely and died the next year.
Oh,
I know.
I think it's a beautiful building.
I do too.
That's unfortunate.
It's pretty beloved.
Shall we?
Should we move on? We're in the museum area.
Now, I know that last time we were there, I wish that we could show everyone the video of this, but you convinced our March travelers, they were very eager to do this, the method of rolling a pound coin down this ramp. You can't tell maybe so much, but this is a sliding ramp, essentially, not too steep. But you had, I think, about 6 of our travelers running down this hill chasing pound coins. It was
Listen, I'd do it again. I mean, this is Turbine Hall at the Tate Modern Art Gallery. It used to be the Bankside Power Station. It was converted. The conversion was finished in 2000. Mm-hmm. And it's gigantic. Turbine Hall is obviously where the big turbines were. And now you can have huge works of art there. What you're seeing is kind of just half of it, actually, and the big installation is beyond there. But I like how the people are a little bit blurry because they're chasing their pound coins. You can start there at the very back. That's actually just an open entrance. It's not even a door. You can just start there, put your pound coin down, and it'll roll all the way down that vast space, which actually has as much floor space as Westminster Abbey. Isn't that amazing?
They've done some pretty cool, because of that huge space, they've done some great temporary installations there. Most recently, a pretty amazing fountain, right kind of where we would be standing if we had this view at the other end. They installed a really interesting fountain commenting on the slave trade between continents. They've had a huge slide that started up on one of those upper levels that came down. You could slide down it. They've had swings. They've had an atmospheric experience where you laid down and you looked up. I mean, they've done some great things in this space.
Yeah, I think that's why it's now the most visited place in London. Mm. But don't forget your pound coin. You got it. Okay, well, we are the name of our trip, we have different names. We did London on Stage. That's what we mostly do. We've also done a Very English Spring, and we've done a history tour. But mostly we do London on Stage. So it's time we saw some stages, Jane, some theaters. Let's look at some theaters.
This is one of my favorites. This is the National Theatre, and we're kind of standing right next to the river. The National Theatre is right facing the River Thames. And this is the main lobby. There are 3 theater spaces within the National Theatre, so it's a you can't go wrong there to go to the National and catch a play there, because there are free options most nights or afternoons.
Yeah, this idea of a national theater, we've never actually had one in America, though we've talked about it. Other countries definitely do. European countries have national theaters, and England just kind of came late to the party to create a national theater. It wasn't really until around World War II when famous actor Laurence Olivier and other people began exploring this notion. They had a notion: what if there were a theater that was publicly financially supported, that had a responsibility to kind of do exciting new work and also classics and keep ticket prices down so that truly anyone could go to it, and it would be high quality work. It started actually in the old Vic Theater, which is sort of pretty close by. But then they built this amazing structure, finished in 1976. Architect Dennis Lasdun did it, and it's got 3 theaters in it, right? Which is your favorite?
I love the smallest one, although I've loved the experience of any productions I've found interesting in different ways, but I do like, it's kind of a black box, as they call it in theater terms, but a flexible space, and it's pretty small and intimate, so I enjoy that space a lot.
Right, now called the Dorfman, used to be called the Cottesloe, but a guy named Dorfman gave a lot of money to refurbish it, and that's what it takes to get a theater named after you.
That's my life goal.
But the biggest of the theaters is named for Laurence Olivier. So I don't think anybody's going to take that away from him. That's the one that's sort of, its model is the theater at Epidaurus in ancient Greece. So it's a big auditorium, but you have amazingly good contact with the stage while you're there. And then the third is the Proscenium Arch Theater, the Littleton. So among those 3 theaters, there's really no kind of play that can't be superbly staged. I'm gonna mention a few of my favorite plays I've seen there, and maybe that will stimulate you to think of some too, Jane. In 1985, I had an experience I'll never forget because it took all day. The play was in that small theater that you talked about, Jane, and it was called The Mysteries. And what it essentially was a medieval series of Bible stories. They used the York cycle mostly. And you went in the morning and you saw the first third of it, which started with before the creation of the earth and introduced God to us. Then you went in the afternoon and it was mostly the Old Testament, and then the Passion in the evening. And it was done as a kind of folk experience with lots of music and a band. I think in 1985, I realized that theater was the most exciting art form I could ever encounter because of that play, The Mysteries.
That's a really good one. You kind of stole that one from me, Tim, because I would say that's probably my favorite immersive and kind of epic experience of theater I had. And again, in the 80s. A few years later than that, in the early 90s, in the same space, was a production called The Man Who, and it was based on a book that a lot of people have probably read, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And I think there's an opera that's been done of it, but Peter Brook and his, what?
I didn't know that, that's amazing.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but Peter Brook and his small company of, I think there were, 3, maybe 4 actors, portrayed the doctors and the patients that are kind of talked about in that book, and that was magical to me in a very different way than something like The Mysteries.
Yeah.
Because it was quite quiet and more cerebral rather than kind of rejoicing, but it was beautiful to kind of understand the way a mind works and kind of get the essence of that book and those patients' stories, but through theater.
That's a brilliant one. I loved that one. I want to mention a couple of newer ones, Connected to Go Learn and London on Stage. In 2013, which was, as Christoph said, our maiden voyage with London on Stage, and he came with us. In the big theater, the Olivier Theater, was a production of Othello, Shakespeare's Othello, with Rory Kinnear as Iago, and Adrian Lester as Othello. And the thing I think I liked best about it was sitting close to Christoph, because I think it was him it was like the penny dropped, Christoph, for you. I know you're listening in, that Shakespeare fun, even though it was also a tragedy. So that one was, I really loved that. Then in 2016, if some of you from the 2016 trip happen to be tuning in, that's when Jane and I took this decision. It was really all Jane's decision. I was 100% against it, but she said we should see 3 Chekhov plays in one day. And so we saw a program called Young Chekhov, Ivanov, Platonov, and The Seagull. It was spectacular. We went to the restaurant there in the National Theater, which is called House, and had a kind of Russian dinner between the second and third play. And people felt like they'd accomplished something when they got through all those 3 plays. I think we should have had a T-shirt that said, "I survived Chekhov at the National."
I think there was a bit more enthusiasm for the Harry Potter parts 1 and 2 that we saw during that same trip. But I think as the years go by, people look back on that Chekhov day with great fondness.
Yeah, listen, when you go to London, you can't figure out what play to see, go to the National. Find something to see at the National, because the chances are it's going to be great and it's going to be cost effective, because it is subsidized theater. But it's not all the National, right? Let's look at the next one. There it is, the Victoria Palace Theater. That's where we saw Hamilton in 2019, and then again in 2020. I feel like I am a total Hamilton veteran now. This is a classic West End theater, right? It seats over 1,500 people, opened in 1911. It's opulent inside. It's got a chandelier. It's got yards of red velvet curtain and plenty of bad seats, right?
There are.
How do we make sure we don't? Idea. Yeah. Talk about what your philosophy is on getting tickets.
Well, I like to sit close to a stage, and luckily, and again, London is still, even with a big kind of commercial theater like Hamilton's production of the Victoria Palace, you can get great seats for even for several people in the case of Hamilton, not break the bank. So there are ways to do it, and I'm not going to reveal my secrets, but we did have great seats for Hamilton. We'd gotten them about a year in advance, but we had great seats for Hamilton.
Yeah, that's part of the secret right there. Okay, moving on. This is the Royal Court Theater, well, the sign for the Royal Court Theater. This is not a West End theater, or is it? Is it a West End theater? Maybe it is.
I think it.
Is it West End? West End, a theater, to be in the West End doesn't have to be along Shaftesbury Avenue. It just has to be a member of the Society of West End Theaters, the acronym of which is SWET, and that's no mistake. But if it is, it's a much smaller one, and it features lots of world premieres. And it's been featuring world premieres for well over 100 years. George Bernard Shaw premiered Man and Superman and Major Barbara and 12 other of his plays here at the Royal Court Theater at the beginning of the 20th century. The week I was born, Jane, John Osborne's play Look Back in Anger opened here at the Royal Court Theater, generally thought of as marking the beginning of modern British drama. I couldn't be there, but I wish I had been there. It's a really important theater, and again, it's not an expensive theater. You can get tickets there for a reasonable price, really reasonable.
Yeah, and like a lot of the theaters, they're really good to students or young people. And so if you're just grabbing a couple of tickets and you're going to the upstairs, you can see a play for less than £10. And they have 2 theaters here. They have the main theater and then the upstairs theater. And my favorite memory recently at the Royal Court was seeing The Ferryman, which then moved on and moved to Broadway. But when we saw it, there was a lot of buzz around it. I mean, I think the night we went, who were the celebrities in the audience? And I was so bizarre.
Dustin Hoffman was there when we went there.
Nicole Kidman and
Nicole Kidman,
whatever his name is that she's married to.
Country singer husband.
Yeah, so it was a little starry, and I adore the way our with the student group, the TA at the time, was sat right next to Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman. He had no idea who they were. He was like, well, I'm here to see the play. I'm not here to see stars.
That's true. And favorite memory of mine was in 2016 when we went to, every once in a while it happens that because there's a play that we just have to see, it's a must see, but it happens to fall on the night that everybody gets there. So everybody's jet lagged out of their minds, but we've got to go because it's like closing night. One of them at this theater was by a young playwright named Alistair McDowell, who, as far as I know, is the only one really committed to putting science fiction on stage. And it was his play X, which is about British astronauts living on a base in Pluto, and it starred the woman who was the star of Call the Midwives.
Oh, yeah.
Call the Midwives. And so there they were. They were all jet lagged out of their minds. And this play is just mind blowing. At one point, the lights go out and then they come back on. There's a giant bird on stage, and then the lights go out and somebody's slashing their throat, and afterwards, people came out and were just shell shocked after this play. And what could we say except welcome to London?
Oh, a very different theater space.
Another place you have to go. This, by the way, this is Shakespeare's Globe Theater. That's its official name. And you're standing with a lot of other people there, up to 400, in the yard. This is one of the great bargains in London, and everyone should do it. Go to Shakespeare's Globe Theater, stand in the yard. Tickets have been £5 for, I think, 10 years. I don't think they've raised the ticket prices.
In '97, I think, and I think they've kept it at £5.
They kept it at £5, so 20 years. This is the production of Merchant of Venice we saw a few years ago. We're now in our Shakespeare section. We have a few Shakespeare pictures, and this is one of them. I was there, I think you were there, for the original production in 1997, when the reconstructed Globe was finished and was now ready to produce a play. They did Henry V as their first play, and it starred its brand new artistic director and actor, the kind of new Richard Burbage, if you will, an actor named Mark Rylance played Henry V. And what was most ironic about it was that Mark Rylance doesn't believe Shakespeare wrote his plays.
We'll forgive him for that because he's
a blockhead, but he's a really brilliant actor. Okay. This next one is special invitation only. Jane gets us into this every year, and you have to go see it, but you can't do it. You can't just walk in. This is Middle Temple Hall, and why it's important to theater is a lot of plays during the Elizabethan period actually were performed in this very hall. It is not significantly different in many respects as it was in 1573 when it was finished as a kind of dining hall. You can see the dining tables there. Middle Temple was then what we would call a law school, and still is actually, or at least law pupils work there. They apprentice there. But it was always also a cultural hall. Look at that gorgeous roof, double hammer beam roof. It's 101 feet long. Now, unfortunately, you can't have every picture, but what you can't see is we're in the musicians gallery above the place where a platform would have been where the plays were put on. But you could those tables were movable. Lots of light, right, coming in from the windows. And we know that, for example, on February 2nd, 1601, Shakespeare was in this room performing his play, Twelfth Night. Now, think about how Twelfth Night begins. It begins with a speech by a character named Orsino, and he says, "If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it so that the appetite may sicken and so die. Now you know that that line was written for a dining hall, and that there was a musicians gallery with musicians playing in it. Pretty amazing room.
Yeah, it is, and it's, I mean, I guess you can kind of get a sense of how big it is from this perspective, and certainly when you're on the ground where that young student with the backpack is walking, it's just, it's quite big, but yet it feels so warm. I don't know, those beautiful wood tables and plaques. I just think it's the most gorgeous room, and it shows up in films and so forth. So you, even if you've never been there, you may recognize that.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good.
I guess we're moving on.
We're moving on. This is more part of the Shakespeare walking tour that we do when we're there. We're in Southwark Cathedral now, which is across the river from Middle Temple Hall. This would have been Shakespeare's parish church when he went to church. And his brother, Edmund, his younger brother, Edmund, had his funeral here and is buried in the churchyard in 1607. Edmund was an actor. Also, Shakespeare's collaborator, John Fletcher, with whom he wrote 2 plays at the end of Shakespeare's career, the beginning of Fletcher's, the middle of Fletcher's. The 2 Noble Kinsmen and Henry VIII, he's also buried in the churchyard. Died in 1625. But what you're seeing there, it's dark, but can you see that there's a figure lying there? That's Shakespeare. That's entirely made out of alabaster. And it was put up in 1905. Henry McCarthy was the sculptor. Every April 23rd, Jane, I just have to ask you, why is April 23rd important?
Well, it is, I believe, Shakespeare's birthday.
It is his birthday. Maybe also his death day.
Maybe.
But on April 23rd every year, somebody sticks a sprig of rosemary in the hand of that alabaster reclining figure of Shakespeare. Why rosemary? Well, remember Ophelia in Hamlet says rosemary is for remembrance, pray love, remember, she says. So that's why they do that. The window actually didn't go in until much later. That was unveiled in 1954 on Shakespeare's birthday, April 23rd, 1954. The actress Sybil Thorndike sort of pulled the curtain on that. And it's got lots and lots of Shakespeare characters in it. So when you go to Southwark Cathedral, another place you can get in for free, look and see how many of the characters you can identify in that Shakespeare window. All right, we got one more Shakespeare thing to look at. Now we're not in London. We're in Oxford. We're at the Bodleian Library, University of Oxford. We're in the Weston, what do they call it, building, I guess, part of the Bodleian Library. And can you see there are 3 prominent books shown there? The one in the middle is Shakespeare's First Folio from 1623. That's one of the actual, it's a copy, but the real thing of Shakespeare's First Folio. And the woman up there is another friend, right, Jane?
Alexandra. And I didn't give a shout out to the porters at Middle Temple Hall, but we've had many people help us have great experiences over the years. But yes, that's Alexandra, who is, I want to get her title right. She's head of the Rare Book? Anyway, she has a title that's great, but I can't remember it from the Bodleian.
She's a librarian, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alexandra Franklin, and she is, one of her specialties is the physical material of books, how books are made. So you see in front of her 2 big looking stamp things. Well, those were inked, and then that's how you put the ink on the print, the metal print, and then ran the paper, or put the paper on it and then ran the press over it. She's amazing. She knows so much. We can just call her up and say, you know, we're seeing these plays this time. Can you get us some materials, original manuscripts to do with these plays? And she gets them, and she's delightful. And one of the things that Go Learn does.
Absolutely.
And now we're done with Shakespeare, but we're not done with ancient manuscripts. I hope some of you can recognize either people you know or maybe you yourselves in this photo. We're now not at Oxford, we're at Cambridge. This was just last October at the Parker Library at Corpus Christi College, Cambridge. And what that very beautiful white-haired woman is leaning precariously over is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle that goes back to the 9th century and was caused to be written by Alfred the Great. Now, the guy that's standing there presenting all this to us is the sub-librarian, Dr. Alexander Devine, there at the Parker Library. And he's not at all worried that we're, so close to one of the most ancient manuscripts in all of England. And that's because he said to us, well, look, they're made out of vellum. They're made out of kind of sheepskin. The oil's on your hand. They won't do anything to it. How about that? Come to England and feel the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Now we're back in Oxford for a little bit. This is the Bridge of Sighs. That's its nickname. It actually connects the old and the new quadrangles of Hertford College in Oxford over New College Lane. The street that's below it is New College Lane. It's not old. It was finished in 1914. It is not, by the way, a replica of the Bridge of Sighs in Venice. It's sort of more of a loose copy of the Rialto Bridge. But like Earl's Court Station, it's a Grade 2 listed building.
We walk under that if we are in Oxford on a day when we're going to go and hear Evensong at New College. And we go down a couple of little lanes and hear some beautiful choir by either a boys and an adult choir or some combination of the two. And yeah, it's a beautiful way to finish being in such a gorgeous place as Oxford.
True. And now our final Oxford stop. This is not a good picture, but it's what I had. I took this picture once. It's Blackwell's bookshop, and it just looks like a normal bookshop. But in fact, it's not. It's the TARDIS of bookshops. It's bigger on the inside than the outside, way, way bigger. In 1879, Benjamin Henry Blackwell opened this bookshop. And if you go through that door, it looks like a normal bookshop. But if you go down some stairs and down a little corridor, all of a sudden it opens up into this absolutely enormous room with 2 levels known as the Norrington Room. And it's where all the academic books are. And people order academic books from all over the world for this. Even now, last time I said, well, I guess your business is kind of dried up. And he said, no, because the kind of books that they sell, first of all, if you want an academic book, often you want it right now, as soon as it's published, and they make sure that happens. Here's a perhaps interesting fact, interesting to me. Benjamin Henry Blackwell's son was Basil Blackwell, who and Blackwell's has stayed in the family. Basil was also a publisher, and he lived at 20 Northmore Road. And when J.R.R. Tolkien's family got too big after they had their 4th child, Priscilla, he bought their new house from Basil Blackwell.
Oh.
It was right next door. They were in number 22. They bought 20 Northmore Road from Basil Blackwell in 1930.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be in Oxford when you share, we visit or you share about Tolkien and Lewis in Oxford, whether with our Go Learn trips or our undergraduate students. It adds a whole nother level of interest to being in the beautiful city of Oxford. So,
okay, I agree. But now we're back in Cambridge. This is a house museum called Kettle's Yard, the home of Jim and Helen Eade, who lived there from 1958 to 1973. It's now owned and operated by Cambridge University. But Eade was the curator of the Tate Museum in London, one of the curators, and he championed contemporary artists. So he filled this house, which was actually put together from some almshouses, with contemporary art. And he also created an art history library there, and everyone can visit. Again, it's free, am I right? You
It
have
is
to,
free. You have to arrange it, and
Yeah.
we had a private tour. But yes, it's free. They gave it to the city. He gave it to essentially the city of Cambridge, although University of Cambridge I think manages it, and they have little concerts there and so forth. And they want people to be able to research and use it as an inspiration. But yeah, I love it.
Ede believed that art and nature went together. And so because in his bequest, when he gave it to Cambridge, he said it should be kept the way we had it. You see all those rocks, those are just collected pebbles. And look at that painting down below the chair. He also thought it was crazy for people to always put art up at the eye line if you were standing. He said, mostly in rooms you sit.
Yeah.
So why not have some art down there?
Yeah, I love that. We're reaching an hour. Do you think let's unless Christoph interrupts us, maybe we could at least look at the last couple of images.
Okay, these are the markets,
Yeah.
and so we got 3 of these markets. This is Borough Market. We'll allow ourselves 1 sentence each. What do you want to say about Borough Market?
It's where I first had raclette, and my life has never been the same since.
It's where I first had raw oysters with Tabasco sauce, and my life has never been the same since. Next.
Is this Columbia Road Flower Market?
Yeah, Columbia Road Flower Market.
Yeah, another great street market.
Yeah, I once saw, it's a flower market, but it's got a lot of other things around it, and it's a Sunday only market, 8 a.m. to about 3 p.m. And I once saw somebody carrying away, presumably because they bought it, about a 10-foot banana tree. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, going here makes you wish you had a home in London where you could put all the gorgeous flowers and plants. Oh, back to Borough.
Yeah, Neal's Yard Dairy.
Yeah.
What's your one thing you want to say?
What's that Stilton that's so good there? I can't remember the name of it, but you buy it all the time.
Yeah, something like Stitcholetto or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a recent thing that with the Go Learn groups, we've this year gone to a cheese tasting. Just above this room is a private room for cheese tasting, and that's been the most interesting to learn about these cheeses that they locally are very they know the people who make these cheeses. They have friendships with the farmers in England and Wales, etc., where they get these amazing cheeses. So
very good.
Really interesting.
Moving on.
More food.
I mean, it's a great thing to do to go have afternoon tea somewhere.
Yeah.
When you're in England. It was never meant to be a meal. It was invented by the 7th Duchess of Bedford in the early 19th century. And it was because she said that between lunch and dinner, she got, quote, a sinking feeling and needed something to eat. And so she started this tradition of having tea and bread and butter and cake sent to her room. That's the beginning of afternoon tea.
Those look like pretty good homemade scones to get the perfect scone and that looks like proper clotted cream there in that dish. We can't finish without at least peeking at Kew.
Okay, maybe we'll make this the last one because we've gone too long. This is Palm House, right? In Kew Gardens, 300 acres of paradise. Kew Gardens is in southwest London. You can get there on the tube with your Oyster card. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And what you're seeing there is the palm house that was finished in 1848 to house tropical plants. And his problem was, well, palm trees, they're bigger at the top, right, than anything else. They're mostly like a canopy. So his inspiration was the hull of a ship that he then inverted, turned upside down, as it were. It's just one of 4 or 5 gigantic and glorious glass houses at Kew Gardens, along with trees, right, called the Old Lions, some of which date back before our War of Independence. When you're tired of the city, just get on the tube, go down to Kew Gardens.
Well, shall we return to Christoph? Are we?
Yes,
I think. Done?
I think.
With all the gorgeous things, I'm going to let you. Oh well, See, there you go. Now we'll have to do part 2 so you can talk about being the most diverse spot in the entire planet. But now we're back, Christoph, and turning ourselves over to you. Oh, Christoph, we can't hear you.
Rookie mistake. I muted myself now. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you, Tim and Jane. You're all wonderful. And I think we could have done another hour for sure, at least me. We had a full house. The webinars are limited to 100 people. And constantly throughout the presentation, the house was full. That being said, I'm going to leave a few more minutes for some questions and answers. There is a little chat button on the bottom or a Q&A. I try to keep a little bit of an eye on this, so maybe people have questions. We had one question come in, or 2 questions already, regarding the plays. How many of those plays, and how do you pick them, and what's up with the plays? Just give us a few minutes on that.
I'm turning to Professor Slover on this.
Okay. Variety is part of the idea. We're there for, it's a 10-day trip. And so we feel like we should get to 6 plays, sometimes a little more, 1 more or so. And so variety is one of the things we do. The other thing is we're interested kind of in whatever are the plays that are kind of rocking the theater world at the moment. So we at least go to some new plays that are highly recommended, and often they're by playwrights we know of and have seen their work before. Other times it's too good an opportunity because there's an actor that is a must-see kind of actor, like Ian McKellen or someone like that. Other times it's the director. You know, whenever Robert Icke directs a play, we ought to go see it. And then sometimes it's production. If there's an exciting new production of a Shakespeare play that's legit, if you know what I mean, then we're interested in that. So that's kind of how we do it. And then after we go back and forth a little bit. We want to get everybody into the National. We want to get everybody into a small kind of off West End theater, and we want everyone to have a West End experience. So we kind of mix that formula together and see what we can do. And then I turn to Jane and say, make it so.
Cool. Well, I see a few more, if you want, so attendees calling in. You know, we all know her. Pat is saying hi. And of course, we all know Jeannie.
Hi to both of you.
So you see, any trip of Go Learn, but this one in particular is very quickly becoming like a family. People come back to these trips, but mostly also, if someone new comes in, they're being just taken under our wings, and Tim and Jane show everyone a really great time. So.
Well, everybody shows everybody a really great time. And that's the family part of it that's so amazing.
Discussions, I was lucky enough to go with you a few times, and the discussions are really enriching when people see certain things about a play that I had not seen. Different viewpoints, different age groups or gender or life experiences that are being drawn in, and everybody contributes. So that's wonderful. Another question that came in was, do more of these webinars. Where can we find them? Let me do a really quick plug on this. Next week we have another panelist. This time we go to Philadelphia next week. It's always on a Thursday. It's at noon, and you can find us at golearn.utah.edu. There's a little button that you can click on, and all the panels are there, and you can register. That's golearn.utah.edu, and you can join our next one. It's Philadelphia. We're talking about our Constitution. So in this case here today, it was London and its stages. We had, Lucci had, either Lucci or Lucy had a question. How much free time, this is a good one. How much free time do you schedule? How much free time do you give us?
Go ahead, Jane.
Well, I remember Tim saying this after our 2013 trip that Christoph came on, the first one we did with Go Learn, although we had done student ones for a while, and and we learned that we had not allowed enough free time because there's just so much we wanted to do and show everyone. And I think as the years have gone by, we've learned to pull back a little bit, and so that we show and things and go together to things that would be harder to just find or arrange, but then allow for some flexible time at the end of, say, we went and saw the John Soane House Museum, had a private tour, which was really fascinating. And then we finished in that area, and some people lingered and went around the law neighborhood, the old law buildings, and then shopped and so forth. So we tried to build in more free time, mostly from learning from Christoph's advice, that people want that. They want to see things that maybe they have, because they've never been to London, or they've never been to London and seen some more kind of out of the way places, but then they want to do their own exploring. So we build in, I think, a decent amount now. But at first we were marching to the to see everything in one trip. But that's one reason to go back, is to see the things you didn't get the chance to do on your first one.
And we always encourage also people to consider extending your stay for your private time,
Yeah.
for private joy, so that either you can be a little bit early. I know that Jeannie always comes a few days early, settles in, and then you can also stay a little bit longer, because the trip is very intense. All the trips that we're doing are, you go and learn, and learning is active participation, and it's it's impactful on you as a traveler. It will grind you down in a way. So to have an extra few days and to go like, okay, I'm going to revisit this cheese place, or at Borough Market, I didn't have the appetite, but that ostrich burger I really wanted. So anyway, we always encourage people to stay a little bit longer, because you just had such an intense experience with our trip leaders, with our faculty, that unwinding in the city itself or in the place that you just traveled to is a gift that you should give to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And speaking of gifts, and we can probably start rounding this up, but I think the pandemic currently does not allow us to travel. It will change how we travel. How exactly this will look like, I do not know. But one thing I'm very positive on is that a lot of people will come to that same realization that Go Learn had a few years ago, that we need to be traveling impactful in a positive way. That the reason that we know our hotel managers is because we are personal, and we know our waitresses even sometimes at the restaurants that we're meeting. We know the curators of museums and things like that. We're not just consuming, like you said, in the Bodleian Library. She knows, this curator there knows that when we come with our people, we want to hear everything about it.
Mm.
First folio, who has ever the chance to leaf through a 450-year-old book or something like that? And that's, our travelers bring that to them. And they're excited about this. We're not just consuming, we're not just rolling through and steamboating through it. We participate in life in London. And I thank you for doing that for us, for the limited people that we can bring, no more than 20 at each time. But thank you, Tim and Jane, for all that work. And we hope to be going back to that sort of traveling again.
Well, I thank you, Christoph. I will say, especially in this trip just 2 months ago, we received follow-up emails from the person who led us around the Millennial Seed Bank, connected with Kew and Wakehurst, and the people at the library and so forth, expressing how much they loved our group of travelers and how much they appreciated that we were engaged in learning from them as guides and so forth. So I'm proud to say that the long relationships we've had with these places continues, and that they really do value the way Go Learn emphasizes what we do there. So they send that appreciation back to to you and to the Go Learn travelers.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been so great. The only thing that I can think of that hasn't received a shout out is your own college and department. So tell us really briefly, what obviously something with theater, right? For someone out there who doesn't know you, Professor Tim Slover, what do you do?
I teach in the Department of Theater, and I teach dramatic literature and playwriting.
Yay, College of Fine Arts. And Jane?
I also teach in the Department of Theater. I teach intro to theater and television and dramatic arts, and mostly right now anyway for all majors, so general ed. And Tim and I both, of course, work with the student learning abroad program in London that is a kind of highlight for the theater major students too.
Great. Again, thank you for doing this. This is pro bono. Thank you for spending almost 2 hours out of your life with us.
Well, you can tell it's a real hardship for us to talk about. I'm embarrassed because we went over so far, but you know, we love you all. We miss you all.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.